So how do you create a better flow in your living room? Hi everyone, it's Carol from Discover Interior Design, and I'm so glad you're here. Well, in this video, we are going to talk about pathways. And one thing to look at in your living room, and one area where you can think about making some small changes so that your living room has a better flow to it. So one thing that we are talking about are those areas in our room where we need to leave them free and clear so we can move around easily or get in and out of a room easily. And we want to look at just to make sure that those pathways aren't blocked in any way. Because if we can just notice that, that's a really simple thing to do, is just to move some things, and right away it helps to create a better flow to a living room. So let me show you what I mean. In this first example, this is a room that I worked on. And what I noticed was I can see there is a seating area where that sofa is. Plus there are two chairs on this other wall, which could be part of that seating area, but it's not the most ideal situation. But the other thing that I wanted to really look at are the pathways. And if there is something that is blocking a pathway so that it would be easy to move around this room and to move in and out of the room. Well, what I noticed is that this room has two entrances and main entrances, openings that go into this room. And there are some natural pathways that are happening that we need in this room to be able to go in there and also move around. But one thing when I noticed where those natural pathways were is that those chairs were kind of right in that pathway, and especially close to the entrance to a pathway in and out of that room. Well, ideally, we really don't want anything in those pathways because we don't have to think about moving around things. Plus, on top of it, if you were sitting in those chairs and having a conversation with someone sitting on the sofa, what happens if people start to walk in and out of the room and they're constantly moving in front of you? Well, that's really distracting and not conducive to a really nice conversation. So one of the simplest things that I did was actually just to move those chairs out of that pathway and move them over to this other area of the room where now they're actually even part of that seating area even more. So just by moving something out of that main pathway, it opened up that room to a better flow already. Plus, there was another benefit because of moving those chairs closer to be part of that seating area. Then it created a more cohesive conversation area for that family. And then for another example, let's take a look at this room. When we look at a floor plan view of this room, we can kind of get a better idea of noticing where the pathways are and if there's anything that's kind of making those pathways a little bit awkward and, stopping a nice flow to that room. Well, I noticed that there is a main pathway from the opening into that room that needs to go into the room, but also needs to go over to that other room, which is the dining room area. And that's a really important pathway. I would even call those just kind of main pathways where we really need to leave those open and clear as possible because they really are these main areas where we have the main traffic, we could call it, of the room. So because this room has the sofa on that one end, plus there's this larger table in the corner, it's kind of creating an awkward little passageway there to get to the other dining room area. Well, just by kind of rethinking how to arrange that furniture, I think it will make a difference on how free and clear and how much flow that room will have. So one suggestion that I would have for this room would be to move that sofa, parallel to the fireplace. The fireplace is kind of the focal area of this room, and it makes sense to kind of have that sofa parallel and centered on that fireplace. And then finish out that seating area by placing those chairs on either side. The other thing I would do is to move that larger table to another area of the room. And I would replace that table with something narrower in that corner or on that wall of the room. And that could be a narrow shelf or maybe even a plant. And just by moving some things around to another area of the room and opening up that pathway that leads directly into the dining room, it creates a better flow to the room. We don't have to have an awkward passageway to get over to the dining room area. Plus, on top of it, we have some benefits of doing that. We're creating a more cohesive seating area that makes sense with that fireplace, and that's the entire focal area of the room. And when we move that larger table to another area of the room where maybe there's more room to put chairs up to the table so we could have a nice place to play games or to do our work, that creates another benefit just by moving some furniture around. So when you feel like your living room has some awkwardness to it, the flow isn't just straightforward and easy, then think about and notice if there's anything that's blocking those pathways, especially those main pathways, the big pathways where we really need to move from one area to the other, or we need to move in and out of a room. And think about how you can maybe move some furniture to another area so that you open up those pathways a little bit better. And when you do that, maybe you'll have another benefit of creating a more cohesive look to your living room. So let me know if you have any questions about this topic and if you have any suggestions for us on how to create a better flow in our living room. Thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.